welcome to the lounge. Today I've got a super special treat for you. I've got Kimi Hughes. She's been all over Misdirected Mark talking about Decuma, a project that is currently kickstarting. But Kimi does a whole bunch of other stuff. She does the Happy Jacks podcast network. I should say she started it, which is awesome. She does cosplay. She does a bunch of other great stuff. We talk about her other game that she's done. So, yeah, we have a great chat. You hear me geek out a little bit, which is something, I guess I do it all the time. So, you know, you're probably used to it. But, hey, oh, and a special treat for you lounge listeners right at the end. For anybody listening, the voice that you're about to hear, if you listen to the Misdirected Mark Network, is going to sound familiar because I think she's been on basically every show, at least every show that we have people on. So I've got Kimi Hughes here from Golden Lasso Games and Happy Jacks, the creator of the successfully kickstarted Decuma. Welcome, Kimi Hughes.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you on here. You've had a chance to talk a lot about Decuma, and I'm sure it's your baby, and I'm sure you love it. But I have to imagine that you're not going to mind talking about a few other things that you do.
Yeah, much as I love talking about it, I'm thrilled to talk about it. I am very excited to talk about other things as well.
Well, so then this is the thing I'm kind of most excited. Again, I love Decuma. I really I can't wait to get my hands on it and play with it and use it as a tool for my gaming. Mm-hmm. That being said, the thing I most wanted to talk to you about is not that you're a cosplayer. And not that you're a cosplayer that plays one of my favorite comic book characters of all time, Big Barda.
Yes.
But a cosplayer who your version of Big Barda for Bombshells became the official one for DC Comics.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's something I still geek out over. I've been cosplaying. Yeah, good.
No, go ahead. I'm interested to hear how this happened.
Well, I've been cosplaying for a while. I started in 2010, 2011, right before cosplay became a big mainstream thing. So, and I love Wonder Woman. That's where Golden Lasso Games came from. If you want to look at my cosplay, I'm Golden Lasso Cosplay. It's a whole Wonder Woman branding thing. But I also really love Big Barda too. And so I've done her traditional outfit. I learned how to do scale mail for it. So I actually have the full blue metal scale mail bodysuit that I wear underneath the armor that I've made, a giant boots, so I'm 6'2" in it. It's amazing. And she's just such a fantastic character. But when the Bombshell statues started coming out, it was before there were plans for comics or anything else. They were just these collectible statues, and they only had, I think there were 4 of them at the time, and they had some others that were sketched out. And it just took cosplay by storm. All these, I think they had Wonder Woman, they had Harley Quinn,
Poison Ivy. I know she was pretty.
Yeah, I think they had a Poison Ivy one, and then they had a Hawk Girl one, I think.
Oh yeah.
With the jetpack thing. So there was a couple of them, and then there was some other artwork floating around for some other ones. And a big group of my cosplay friends were getting it together for Comic-Con, because that's a big thing. We all live in Southern California, so we do these massive groups for Comic-Con, and they had 10 people in it, and they reached out to me and they're like, hey, do you want to be in this group we're doing? And they already had a Wonder Woman, so I was like, okay. And then I was looking at it all, I'm like, hey, do you mind if I come up with my own design? Because none of the designs that were left were really characters that I was super crazy about. They were fine, but it's eh. And they were like, sure, yeah, come up with something. I was like, okay, I'm going to do a Barda. And then I was sitting there and I spent the next couple months planning it out. DC Comics actually came and did a DC All Access show where they came and showed my process of me making this.
Oh, wow.
But they didn't, yeah, but it was totally random. Like they hadn't seen the design or anything yet. And they were just doing it for multiple cosplayers. They do stuff like that every year before Comic-Con to kind of like ramp up hype about it.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, the people they sent didn't know anything about Big Barda, so I was having to explain a lot of it. But so it was just this side thing that totally happened. So I thought that was going to be like the highlight of my Comic-Con, right? Like this video that came to my studio before. And then I make this outfit, and I just love Big Barda so much. So I put all this detailing into it. I got this like vintage I think it's German like pilot's cap from a military supply store, because it was from World War II, and there's just all these things that were like symbolic of her having been in the Female Furies and then turning to good and becoming a hero. That sort of represented that for me, and it's got like this pinstriping that very close, like it sets, if you look at it closely, it kind of looks like, or gives the impression of the scale mail vibe, because I didn't want just straight blue. I wanted there to be some sort of patterning or texturing, because that's such a big deal in all her artwork, is even if it's just drawn on scale mail, like there's a pattern to the blue. And I'm getting way deep in it, sorry.
That's okay. No, I'm all about that.
So I spent all this time designing this outfit. I made it. It's very military inspired. There's like this little coat, but it's still got the corset, so it's like pin-up-y, and these little shorts with it, very 50s pin-up-y look. So I went to Comic-Con. It was really great. People were like freaking out because they were like, oh, they made a Barda. I was like, no, they haven't made a Barda, but they should. They totally should. And then we went, at one point we got asked to go on the stage at the DC Comics booth, which they do all the time. They have cosplayers up there multiple times a day. So in I think the first day was just 4 of us because everyone else was still arriving. Got there, and we were like on the stage posing, and people were taking pictures of us. And this guy comes up to me in this weird suit. It's got like Batman print fabric all over it. It's very, very cheesy and odd, and I have no idea who he is. And then he like hands me his card, and his name's Jim, and he's like, yeah, I'm in charge of the Bombshells line right now at DC. I love this design. And he's evidently a huge Big Barda fan too. He's like, you nailed it. You got everything perfect. And we started like talking, and I started explaining all the stuff on the outfit. And so he's like, okay. And he wrote down my name and my contact info. He's like, I'm going to call you and get in touch with you after Comic-Con. I was like, okay, cool. I didn't really like think that it was because he said, oh yeah, we have a Barda we're designing. So I just thought he was going to geek out or something, because sometimes they make friends with cosplayers. It's not like unheard of.
Sure.
Yeah. So, and then I saw him again the next day, and we were there with the bigger group. There's like 11 of us or something. That was crazy. And then he's like, oh, hey, yeah, I talked to them, and we're interested in like maybe having your design be Barda's design. So I like stopped talking. I'm just kind of like staring at him because I didn't know what to say. And all these other girls around me are all dressed as Bombshells, are like, what did he say? It was like, oh. So we're all freaking out, and we all go have margaritas for lunch and stuff. And then like I try and like be cool for the rest of Comic-Con, because that was like Saturday. And then they got in touch, and I got to go down, and it's weird seeing like pictures of yourself on like a sketchboard. It's very strange.
I can imagine.
And so it was fantastic. It's very cool.
That's awesome. That is so cool. I love the fact that and Big Barda is like kind of that. If there's a DC niche line, like she's on that line, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
She's kind of been around for a long time. I guess if you know the New Gods, you know who Big Barda is. But it's so cool that I don't know. I feel like you walked that line perfectly, and were like, yeah, look, I'm awesome. And they're like, yeah, you're awesome. Let's make that happen.
It was very cool. I was like, oh my gosh. I guess they did eventually use the design. The design they were doing was like a roller derby.
Okay.
So they eventually used that design in like one or two of the comics. She was like in a roller derby or something.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's weird to have what is ostensibly like little figurines of me, which is cool and weird. It's like one of those things you're like, yeah, someday, and then you like don't really think that's gonna happen,
It's
especially like in your early 30s. You're like, yeah, I think I've passed my action figure days, but no.
it's one of those weird things, and this isn't the same at all. But if I may allow my own
Yeah.
anecdote real quick, years ago I was working at the Apple Store, and I worked there for a while, and I helped out this guy with his email because his email wasn't coming through, and I
Mhm.
basically just like deleted um, his email and helped him reset it, and it worked, and it was great. And he was like, "Thanks so much," and I'm like, "Great, yeah, well, have a great day." And I'm a big fan because it was Matt Stone from South Park.
Oh, oh, that's cool.
And I didn't say anything before that, but I was like, I'm a big
Hmm.
fan. He realized, like, oh, he knew who I was the whole time.
Yeah, you were
What
just
was
cool.
cool about it?
Yeah.
So, years later, I come into work one day, and I wasn't really like watching TV at the time. And
Hmm.
somebody says, "You were on South Park last night," and I was like,
What?
"What?" You're like, "Yeah, no, it was you. It was like when you first started at the store, you were on South Park last night." And I'm like, I that's not possible, you know. So there's a South Park episode where they go to the Apple store and they're dealing with all the stuff and they're dealing with
Hmm.
people at the Genius Bar, and there's this guy and I'm like, he doesn't really look like me, you know. This must be who they're talking about. He kind of had this long hair, and then he calls for this guy to get more help, and this guy comes in and he's got like my exact goatee and like my exact like pulled back hair and everything, and I'm like, oh
Oh.
no.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So um
That's
so it's
very
not
similar, actually.
it's yeah I like Matt Stone didn't come find me and was like, I want to make you immortal,
Yeah.
but that's it's cool to have that stuff, but it's a weird thing to suddenly realize, like, oh my god, did you know that's
Yeah.
that's what somebody made a thing from me, I think. I'm
Yeah.
not sure, at least you know.
Yeah, that's true. Although they made me sign a thing like I like they don't give me credit for it or any of that stuff. Like
uh,
if I wanted to like whip out the contract that they had me sign, like I have a copy of that as proof,
mhm.
but like they that's very much like DC and all these big companies. They're like, we're gonna just take credit for everything.
Yeah.
But enough people saw it, and my stuff was all out there. Like that was kind of the funny thing later, because they're like, yeah, you know, we're gonna make sure we, you know, we own the design now, blah blah blah. You can obviously still cosplay it and all these things, but they'd actually made that DC All Access before any of that contract stuff was signed. So they documented with their camera crew me making the outfit before they ever like. So I'm like, yeah, well, I've got that proof too. So that's exciting.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's I mean, yeah, of course a big company is going to be like, oh, you don't
Yeah,
get to keep this credit, but
yeah.
I actually this kind of brings me into what I really wanted to kind of chat about with you, which was comic books in general, because I love
Hmm.
comic books. I grew up on comic books.
Yeah, me too.
Um, People will ask me what's my favorite comic book character. I'm like, Beta Ray Bill, and they'll look at me blank, and I'll be like, I don't know,
That
Spider
is a
Man.
very specific answer.
It's pretty specific. I have a
Yeah,
weird feeling that in the next couple of years, people will be like, I love Beta Ray Bill. So, um,
yeah.
for
Fingers
years, my
crossed.
favorite character was Beta Ray Bill. My second favorite was Rocket Raccoon. And
Oh,
then Zatanna was my third. And
yeah,
now everybody knows who Rocket Raccoon is.
yeah.
Zatanna is going to be huge at some point in the near future, I'm sure. Um,
Hopefully, yeah.
But and then like when people are like, "What's your favorite comic book series?" I always say Legion of Superheroes because I love the Legion.
Mhm.
Um,
Nice.
so I'm all over the place. I'm not like a Marvel or DC. I like good writing
Yeah.
and good art and stuff like that. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, you've known all these characters that I'm throwing out there, obviously,
Very excited.
which means you're in it.
Yeah.
Talk to me about like how comics how you got started in getting into comics and stuff.
Oh my gosh. I was a kid. I was like 7 or 8. And I got this like hand-me-down box of comics from a family friend's. Like he was heading to college and like he took all his like nice comic books, but he had like all his like grungy comic books or stuff that had gotten ripped or whatever. So he gave them to us, to me and my sister. She was still a little bit too little to appreciate or have actual paper items. But so I got this box and I just got to dig through it. And there was a ton of stuff in there. Like I still have like almost all of them. There's a bunch of George Perez Wonder Woman in there, which just blew my mind. Like that's really where I was like, who is this character? Because this is long before they had like Wonder Woman. Well, they had Wonder Woman cartoons and then they disappeared for like my childhood era. And then they hadn't come out with anything. And it was a few years before we got like Batman the Animated Series and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So that was part of my childhood, but a little bit later. So it's like I lived in an all-woman household. My dad wasn't around. So I got teased a lot. I've always been really tall and athletic. I've been very competitive in sports my whole life. So then suddenly there's this Amazon who is tall and athletic and lives in a all-woman island. They don't need any men, things like that. And it was just something that resonated so strongly with me at that point. Like everyone loved her and respect her, and she was wise, but also badass and beautiful, and just like all the things I wanted to be like were in this one character. There was also like New Mutants was in there. There's a bunch of new Teen Titans, which is no longer new, but they were new then. So there's like all these different things in this box, just like random things. But that was the thing that I just like remember. And like I still have that old one that I had there, and I've collected since then most of the George Perez Wonder Woman line. They're on like the little plastic protectors and stuff. But just it was sort of like revolutionary for me because I didn't have anyone in my household who read comic books at all. Like we were very book people, things like that. So I read a lot, but suddenly like this is just amazing. It was just so cool. And that was just like where kind of my love of it was born. And, I'd go and save up my allowance and buy comics and all these different things. So it was just kind of amazing. It was super fun.
Do you think that you've been kind of influenced by comics as you've gotten into the other hobbies that you've gotten into?
Oh, I think absolutely.
I mean, obviously cosplay, but
cosplay, yeah, cosplay is like the very cool. But I didn't get into cosplay till like I was very well into my adult years. I was actually much older than most cosplayers when I started cosplaying. I was like my late 20s. But yeah, I think the visual medium of it, I got very into film and video production for a long time. I actually went to college for a little while for that. I think that was very indicative and inspired by kind of the graphic layout of comic books. And I always had a really good eye for it. I ended up not going into it professionally because oh man, especially for women, it's a really difficult industry. And I was like, you know what? There's a lot of other things I love, but that was always very informed by that. And I found I was very good at editing together like action sequences. And I think partially because of my love of comic books and my familiarity with how to edit something together based on seeing, the panels of comics.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like it's easy to build a, I can't think. It's a video term. You'll think of it before I do.
Storyboard?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's easy to like build that in your head as you're going along.
Yeah, but there's a continuity to action sequences that even like if you watch some modern comic book movies, they don't do super well. Mm-hmm. So that you can even though they're very quick shots, you can still very easily process what's happening. Mm-hmm. And this, when you're watching comic book movies and action movies, is kind of, for me, is one of the things I look for. It's like random shots all from different angles. You get kind of, you can follow what's happening, but like the great ones are ones where you can cut between different shots from similar angles, so you can really follow the movement almost like a dance.
That's
yeah.
And those aren't. Sometimes you'll see one of the superhero movies that's cut like that, but lately I've seen more non-superhero movies that have that like, oh yeah, like that's somebody who is using really good storyboarding techniques to tell the story, and
Yeah.
yeah, um, that's fantastic. Now, at some point, you got into role playing games.
Yes.
Let's talk about
Uh,
that.
yeah, that was sort of a long process. I tried D&D. I don't even remember what edition it was in junior high. And like, most junior high kids and my friends, we didn't really have enough attention span, and there was no adult helping us to like really process D&D. So we were middling successful at it. We ended up most of the time like starting and then ending up like getting bored and playing video games. Uh, so I got really into video games, basically, especially like MMOs. I started with Ultima Online back when it was
Oh,
like
yeah.
I know, right? Way back in the day. Um, and but I was like one of those like hardcore role players in there that everyone made fun of. I was actually in a guild that I was like one of the elders in it or whatever. That was we role played basically elves, and we spoke in Quenya, which is one of the elven languages in Lord of the Rings. So that's not really something you can add to a resume, though. Like, hey, I speak Quenya or type Quenya. Can speak it, but I can type it. And then so I just kind of progressed through. Like then there's like the MMO evolution that happened, ending up finally in like World of Warcraft with the most recent one, and playing a bunch of other video games along the way. And then when fourth edition came out, me and a bunch of my friends, because at the time I worked at the Renaissance Fair, we found ourselves like talking about like role playing games specifically between our shows, because we were in a bunch of bands at the Renaissance Fair. And one of the guys is like, hey, this new edition's coming out. We don't all have to buy like a gazillion books to catch up or have all the stuff for D&D anymore, because all of us were kind of like old role players who'd fallen out of the hobby. And the big thing that kept us from jumping back in was you had to buy like 50 books to be able to play that current edition of D&D. Kind of like when there's a comic book run and you're just like, oh, okay, well, I have no idea what's happening. I have to buy like a ton of comic books to catch up. But when they do a reboot, then you're like, oh, okay, I can jump in again. So we got a D&D game together. It very quickly went way out of hand. I think at one point we finally had like 9 or 10 people in this game. So it was, yeah, if you played 4th edition, that's like nightmare, because the combats are crazy. Like they're so long, and it's just, oh man. But we were all excited to be back in the hobby. That's actually when Happy Jack started, because that was the same group. We were all Ren Fair musicians that were bored, and we happened to have a recording studio because we recorded CDs for our music, and we're like, hey, let's get drunk and talk about D&D 4th edition. That sounds great. People would love to hear us do that. And then weirdly enough, people did actually enjoy that. So yeah, and then from there we kind of branched off. We obviously do not play 4th edition anymore. We've actually, we played tons of different systems now, and IGM, and made my own game, and I have a gaming company now, so that kind of spiraled out of control. I seem to collect hobbies, honestly.
I know that feeling very well. I do that
Yeah.
exact same thing. I'm just like, oh, I think I'm going to do this thing now, and next, like when I started podcasting, I was writing for a comic book focused geek blog. And I was definitely like the comic book and RPG expert there. And I was like, oh, hey, we should have a podcast. And like, I don't know how to do that. I'm like, well, I bet I could figure it out. And next thing I knew,
Can't be that hard.
yeah, next thing I knew, it was like, hey, can you edit these podcasts for us? I'm like, am I an editor now?
Thing?
Oh no.
Yeah. What have I done?
I think I accidentally picked up another hobby. Yeah, I mean, I think though that I think that they end up kind of all relating together in some way. Like there's a facet of I'm gonna go ahead and say our personalities, not that we're the same, but
It's fine. Lots of similarities, very obviously.
Yeah. You know, where like it's like, yeah, but like I can almost make this like perfect thing if I just learn a little bit more here. I guess I'll just learn
Yeah.
more. It's like I'm just gonna do that now. Um,
Keep focusing. I can do
yes,
it. I know I
exactly.
can do the thing.
Um, so let me ask you this: have you had a chance to play a lot of different superhero role-playing games?
I have. Right now, I'm GMing a Masks actual play for Happy Jacks right now. Masks is one of my favorite. It's a Powered by the Apocalypse system by Magpie Games. And I just love like I said, like New Teen Titans was in that box when I was a kid, and I've loved Teen Titans, especially like that era.
Yeah,
I love that, and they're much more teenagers in that era than they are in like the more modern Teen Titans books. So I love kind of that flavor, and Masks just captures that so perfectly. Like you don't have perfect control of your powers, and they do a really amazing job with the tie-ins with the different characters together, with the character connections during character creation. It's just like a really, really great flavor, and they nail the flavor that they're going for so perfectly, and
it,
make it very playable.
it's funny because recently I reread the entire first run of New Mutants,
Yeah.
just because I wanted to, and I hadn't really read it as a whole before. And as I
Mhm.
was reading through it, I'm like, oh, they definitely read this for Masks,
Oh yeah.
100%.
Absolutely, yeah. And then now the movie's coming out, so
Yep.
in a couple months, yeah. But yeah, and I love that, and I love PBTA systems on the whole. I really think it's a really elegant dice mechanic, and a lot of the hacks are really great.
Hmm.
I also really love Wild Talents, which uses the ore system, the one roll engine. I've GM'd that a ton. Actually, that's the game I've GM'd more than anything else. And kind of like Vampire the Masquerader things, you just roll a ton of d10s, and it's very fun. But for that one, you're looking for like matches instead of like dice totals, which is very interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it has a mechanic for the fights that is like one of my favorites and really captures the vibe of like if you're looking for like teenage superhero drama, Masks cannot be beat. It's the best.
Hmm.
If you're looking for a system that replicates like what an actual fight would be like for superheroes, I haven't found anything that I like better than Wild Talents, because
Okay.
it's called the one roll engine because everybody rolls at the same time, and your rolls basically adjudicate what happens in what order.
Hmm.
So we all go around and we declare what we're doing. So if I'm aiming to shoot the guy's head and you're going to go punch the guy's head, our rolls will figure out, okay, do you punch his head and then my bullet hits your hand, or does my bullet hit first and your hand goes through like a cloud of blood? Like, so it's really fascinating, and the combats go very quickly. It's a very fun system.
Hmm. Yeah, I will. I'm just as a note, I will be picking that up. Um,
Yeah, it's very cool.
I tend to collect superhero systems, so um,
That's a good one. It's a very, very good one. Yeah, those are my two favorites. I've played some other ones, but as far as like true superheroes, like those are the best.
okay, very cool. That's the some good. I mean, Masks is just a great game. I've played that a few times, and
Mm.
not nearly as much as I want to. But that's awesome. My first game that I got really into was the Phase Rip Marvel Superheroes.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
so, and I actually have a custom shirt that I wear to conventions that says fighting and agility and strength, and it's got the whole Phase Rip thing in it. And people are like, "Oh,
Cool.
where'd you get that shirt?" I'm like, "I had to make it."
Oh, yeah.
Um, now, with and you're playing lots of different games at this point, as you said.
Yeah,
Um, Happy Jacks has a ton of content.
me
Um,
too.
it's
It's a lot.
it's really awesome. I mean, like, well, I can remember um, just listening to like Happy Jacks, like just listening to a few episodes of Happy Jacks here and there, and like, oh, this is really cool. I never listen to any podcast for more than a few episodes, unless
Yeah.
it's politics, because I like to just like threaten my brain with that. But I listened to Happy Jacks for a while, and I went back to it here and there. In fact, I think probably still subscribe, but like since I've kind of gotten away from it, you guys have so much stuff, and I'm like, oh, I just want to download the entirety of a show and listen to it.
Oh yeah.
And I have more time to listen to podcasts now, which is also a thing that may happen.
Very helpful. Yeah.
Talk to me about like what building that felt like. I mean, obviously you started, with fourth edition stuff, but what was it like to grow something to what it is now?
Oh man, like unexpected and unplanned, which is probably not, which is the honest answer, but probably not the one like everybody wants to hear. So yeah, Happy Jacks, we had our 10th anniversary like last year. So we're in like our 11th year, which is mind blowing. And yeah, I mean, like I said before, like we started as Ren Fair musicians, like between shows, hanging out and like, hey, we have fun with this. There's this thing called a podcast, because podcasting was still fairly new. Most people didn't know what podcasts were a decade ago.
Mm-hmm.
It was this very small group of tabletop role-playing shows at the time.
Mm-hmm.
There was like Kicked in the Dice Bags and Fear the Boot. Fear the Boot's still around too. There's I think Role-Playing Public Radio was right before us or right after us. I don't remember. But most of the other ones have pod faded by now.
Mm-hmm.
Just because keeping up a podcast for 10 years is like, we didn't plan that. Like we just, but for sure we'll be on to more important things with our lives in 10 years. But yeah, it's just one of these things that just like more people got involved and we just kept doing it, and we got, our formatting really, tightened, and then we moved eventually, like our first season or two is just us kind of conversing, talking about it. And then people started writing in emails just randomly from like all over the place, all over the world. So then we switched to a little bit more of a format where we're basically answering questions now. So that's been the format for years at this point. And yeah, we're really lucky that we have this base of people around the world. We started marking it where on a map thing, we finally, I think Africa was our last continent, and we got that one, I think 5 years ago. But we even have one from Antarctica, because we made them. Yeah, we thought, no. It's sort of like, you have to send photographic proof, and they totally did. And we don't know where they are because it's like top secret. We think they're on some sort of research or military base or something down there. But it's like them with this penguin, like with the Happy Jacks like sign they're holding. So it's either very convincing Photoshop, which I'm pretty good at figuring that out and my husband does a lot of that, or it's like a legit, there's a military base where they're listening to Happy Jack stuff somewhere in Antarctica. Go fig. So, and then people wanted to hear us play because we were like giving advice about gaming, and they really liked our advice. So they're like, we'd love to hear you play something. So we started doing APs here and there, just as podcasts. And then eventually, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago now, we started streaming too. So yeah, so now we have 3 or 4 games streamed a week, plus every Friday we have our Friday Advice Show. And I am the lucky person who gets to run like our volunteer cast of about 35 people and like do the spreadsheets to make sure all the games are always full and all the things. So I'm not sure how I got that hobby added to my list, but it's been pretty amazing.
Sometimes we magically invent chores to support our hobbies.
Right, that's exactly what happens. I think the most interesting thing has been watching how the hobby has grown and taken off, and also become much more inclusive. When we started the podcast, I was definitely one of the only women in podcasting about tabletop RPGs. And we'd go to conventions and stuff, and there weren't as many women. There were a lot of women, I think, in the hobby, but it hadn't become a safe enough space for them to like come to things like conventions, I think, very regularly. Okay. And I know I talk about how great some of the emails are, but we would also get emails, obviously we wouldn't read them on air, saying, why do you have this girl on the podcast? Why do you have this woman? Like very negative about having a female voice on the podcast. And then just seeing slowly, and I think a lot of it has had to do with the hobby kind of changing to become more accessible on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really brought a lot more women into the hobby, because you don't have to go up to a message board now and pull off some random stranger's phone number and go meet at their house to play.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that's like, that's a very dangerous situation for anybody. But, as a woman especially, that would 100% be a giant barrier if I had to do that to get into my first games. If I didn't already know people who were playing and know that I could trust them, like I probably would never have gotten into the hobby.
As a large, hairy white dude, that's terrifying to me. Like, like of course it's going to be, if you're not into those handy categories, like that's going to be a weird thing.
Yeah. So I think the fact that now you can sign up, you can play games on, back then it was Skype, and now it's, Discord and all these other ones, Zoom. I think that's really made it so people, so women and, people with disabilities, people who are in other minority groups where it's not necessarily safe for them to just go anywhere. I think it's really opened up the hobby, and you can see that reflected. And I've seen that reflected in convention going as I go to, as I'm still going to conventions many times a year, and I'm seeing just how like the fan base has changed, and that's been fantastic. It's been really, really powerful and exciting.
It's funny because that's actually what brought me back into it. I was gaming through the 80s and 90s. I'm old, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that, but I am. But I was gaming through the 80s and 90s, and then third edition and 3.5 came out, and I was kind of like, this is, I guess, fun still. But I was dropping that question mark at the end of that. And I don't know. I kind of was like, yeah, I'm kind of done with this for a little bit. But it was truly, it was part of it was me going, I miss some of these old games that used to be around. I wish they'd come back, and they started to. And I was like, yeah, that's weird. And then they were like coming back, and like people were playing them that I never sat down at a table with before, no matter how many conventions. There were women, and there were queer people, and there were people of color sitting down at these tables, and I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, I want to be part of this now. So I can totally understand, and I don't think I'm being hyperbolic by saying that I think Happy Jacks was probably a big part of that, because it was definitely recommended to me by people that had kind of gotten into the hobby from listening to you guys. So I just want to make sure that I threw that out there.
I like to think that, I have gotten a lot of emails over the years from women who have said, hey, I heard you on the show, when, and it made me think that I could do this too. Or that I was really interested in this, or I'd played once with, one group, and then, I had to move and I couldn't find another group. So like having, and I'm not the only woman on Happy Jacks by any means. No. I'm kind of like the longest running, but we have many now. So having that, presence for so many years, like especially when it used to be a much more rare thing. And then now, especially with our streaming, we work really hard at diversity and making sure that we have lots of people of color and things like that, and different LGBTQIA representation, disabled representation, as much as possible for each one of our games, because it's important, especially now that we have the visual medium, to really be showing like the diversity. Back when it was just podcasting, it was harder to tell what the makeup of a game was when you were listening to an AP. Sure. But now people are looking and they're tuning in. They want, and a lot of them don't know if this hobby's for them. So seeing someone who resembles them or has a shared experience with them is very powerful. And I think that's one of the biggest things that's contributed to the boom in the last few years. Like a lot of people say, oh, Critical Role's, popularity. Well, yes, I think that does have something to do with it. I think the streaming component in general with everyone, and all the different ones, there's so many streams out there now that have different representation. I think that people being able to see themselves in tabletop role playing and seeing themselves represented has been actually the biggest contributing factor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like there's also been a few people that have said, well, I don't like this. And I definitely, I don't feel like that's a huge loss, because I feel like those are the people that I would looked at and went, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore anyways.
Yeah.
So
I don't think we really lose them, unfortunately. So I find myself the brunt of a lot of that on the internet and things like that. But most of those people don't leave the hobby. They continue running their game in whatever misogynistic, bigoted way they want in their living room with their 4 closest friends who are also probably bigots and misogynists. And they can do that. I mean, that's not the great thing, but that's the great thing about this hobby is like, if you're not streaming, you can run it however you want.
Sure.
If you and your group are, enjoy certain things, then that's fantastic. Like if you're having fun, great. But yeah, unfortunately, there's still those people who long for the old days, who never, a lot of them just with their own privilege, just never recognized the gatekeeping that was happening.
Yeah.
And now they feel, a lot, and there is the component of, for a very long time, tabletop role-playing games, all these kind of nerd, hobbies that we love so dearly were a way to empower people who felt very, unempowered in their real lives. That was, a big thing for video games. For me, MMOs, that was absolutely a kind of an escapist empowerment fantasy. And for a long time, that's what tabletop was for a lot of people. So to see the thing that made them feel powerful suddenly make them feel not powerful, or maybe they don't know everything about it, or that they have to watch what they say, at the gaming table, it's a hard adjustment for people.
Yeah.
It's one they have to do. I'm not making excuses because they're assholes if they don't make that adjustment, but it's something that's it's a changing culture that we're still really working through, I think, as a hobby and as a community.
Well, I like to think of it, and I like to take this approach with a lot of things, as a pyramid, whereas the more you expand the base, the higher the tip of it can grow. And the other analogy I use is that I think there's a lot of dudes, and I know that this is being reductive to a certain segment. It's not all of them, but I do call it white guy pie, where they're like, there's a pie and there's only so much pie. And if I lose some of my pie, that means I don't get as much pie. And I was like, that's not the way it works. It's just not.
No, especially with role-playing games. It's like, you have your game in your house. Like, no one's taking any pie from you.
Right.
Like, I mean, so I think that's the frustrating thing too. And it's a great way of like kind of describing it, is they feel like the shares of this thing are running out and now being given to other people who, and nerd community has a problem with this in general, is kind of like hating on newcomers.
Mm-hmm.
And like, oh, well, you've only been a fan since blah, blah, blah. Well, and I still run into that all the time. I'm in a bunch of D&D groups on Facebook, and that actually happened to me like yesterday. Like, and in these groups, like, I don't like represent myself as, oh, I'm, Kimi from Happy Jacks. I, GM 2 games a week, and I run, I play in 3 games a week, and I give advice to people all over the world about role-playing games. I'm just like, it's my Facebook name, which is like my real legal name, and like it's my 4th grade teacher picture, and like all the Monday, very much the Diana Prince to my Wonder Woman of nerddom. And and yeah, I was like talking about what was it? GM PCs and the problems with the GMs having a consistent player character that they play that goes around at the party,
Mhm.
as opposed to like just an NPC that floats in for certain stories and things like that. Um, and like I was talking, and this is just a random dude on the internet. And he's like, well, sounds like you had a bad DM. Don't worry, Kimmy. There's good DMs out there. You'll find one day. I was like,
Wow.
yeah. And like, I was like, first off, you have no idea what my experience with tabletop RPGs is. So, like, that was a very condescending reply. Also, here's my essay on why this is a bad idea. And then I just never got a reply to that essay. But
Yeah, I mean,
it was
yeah.
close to an essay anyway. But it was just, it's one of those things. And he, like, of course, before that, he prefaced, with my 40 years of DMing, I've never had a player complain. Yeah, and it's just like this whipping it out measuring stick thing that we tend to do in geek hobbies. And it's just like that doesn't matter. Like you can be a fantastic, I mean, there are new players that I play with that are so much better at, just like memorizing game books and things than I am, just because that's just not my biggest strength. Like I'm great at taking all the notes I need so I can run games well. But like, oh, my friend Pooja, who's, jumped in and is playing a bunch of our games at Happy Jacks right now, she's like a mechanics wizard.
Mm-hmm.
Like she can read a book and just like absorb their knowledge, like through magic, like by touching it or something. I don't know. Yeah, it's amazing. And I'm just like, yeah, I don't have that.
That's fantastic. That's
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny too because I feel like I've been playing for ages and ages, and and yet I don't use this as a cudgel. I've discovered over the last like 5 years that I didn't know shit. Like like I was playing like an idiot, and like I feel like a lot of these, and I mean, I'm not saying that they're necessarily idiots.
No.
I like that I keep throwing caveats into what I'm saying about this toxic group of people. But
Yeah.
there's a good chance that if like I learned to play with those people, and I'm sitting here going, "Oh, I was a bad player. I was a bad GM," like there's a good chance they're bad GMs. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a thing. Like you can always learn more. I will say I do love to throw around the length of time I've been gaming when people throw that at somebody where I'm playing with, because
Right.
that's when it gets to be like, oh, you're playing Masks, that's cute. I play Champions.
Mhm.
Cool. I played Champions first edition.
Yeah.
And here's Sledgehammer.
Yeah, there's a reason why these games have many editions, because each one makes them more palatable
Yeah.
for, yeah, or at least that's the intent. Sometimes they fail miserably at that, but there's a reason that many of us have migrated away from some of those first games, and then there's new stuff out,
Yeah.
that streamlines it, and I mean. I do nostalgia too, and every once in a while I'll be like, oh, I need to go back and play that. But there's yeah, it's just frustrating because the fact that you played D&D first edition doesn't make you any better at playing D&D fifth edition.
Right.
Because they're completely different. I mean, that's like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like being like, well, I used to read the encyclopedia. That's so much better than having the internet. And it's like, no.
Yeah.
No, it's not better. It's just different and older. And I say that as someone old enough to have actually used encyclopedias.
Oh, yeah.
But it's like those are two. They're not comparable. They're not necessarily the same thing. So it's cool that you can whip it out and like have that long length of time that you get to measure and wave in people's faces. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be any better at it than someone who's picked it up more recently.
Right. I'm more interested in like the lessons you've learned from having done that for so long. Like that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a more important thing. I can remember I played games with a guy who had memorized a 1917 encyclopedia, and he used to tell this to people, and this was his point of impression, and he says it to me, and I go, so you know a whole bunch of things wrong, and he got very upset. I wasn't invited to his house. Um,
No.
but it's the 1917 encyclopedia,
Yeah, I can't even begin to name all the things that are wrong with that encyclopedia. So many things.
right?
Oh my God.
Um, so, um, so uh, I now that we've been kind of talking about gaming, I'd like to chat about how you got into making your own thing.
Oh yeah.
And
Um, yeah.
I'll preface this with I know that Decuma is the first game that you started to design.
Hmm.
It's not the first game that you finished, because Virgins and
No.
Vixens is the first game you finished.
Yes.
So
Uh,
let's talk about how that came about.
yeah. Okay, so Decuma was sort of inspiration by necessity, I suppose.
Hmm.
I like we were talking about, I GM a bunch of different systems, and I love PBTA.
Hmm.
Uh, specifically the character connection aspect of it. I was finding that when I was playing PBTA games and games that had similar mechanics in their character creation, um, it was just the games just got warmed up faster. Like everybody jumps into session one knowing how they kind of know each other, knowing some relationship dynamics with each other. There's not that awkward, okay, our characters have known each other for years, but we don't really know, we're still feeling it out as players. And I just loved that aspect of it. So I found myself when I was GMing like Wild Talents doesn't have that. So I would, steal the character connections from a comparable PBTA hack, depending on what flavor of game I was running. And I'd throw those in there during character creation. And different things. And I was also pulling things from like Microscope and the Quiet Ear to kind of like build locations with my players as a session zero tool. And a bunch of the GMs I know were also doing something similar to kind of make session zero not just about going over safety tools, but also like let's collaboratively kind of create this place where we're going to work in. Because it really benefited starting in session zero or starting at session one, you were able to just like jump into things in a whole different way than if you didn't do it that way.
Yeah.
So I finally just like, why are we all like reinventing this wheel? Why are we shoehorning these things? Because like Microscope and the Quiet Year are great for creating locations and stuff, but that's not really their purpose.
Right.
Like we're sort of shoehorning them into it when they're meant to be narrative games on their own. So it's like, why don't we just make a tool that's generic, that's system generic, that can do all these things? So that's where I kind of got the idea and started running with it. And I frantically called a couple of my friends, like at like a Wednesday one night. Like I'd spent the last 2 days like frantically writing in a notebook, super jumbled mess. And I was like, I have this idea for a game. Can you come over to my house right now? And they were great, and they did. So we played like the very first rendition of what ended up becoming Decuma, which is like these really badly written out charts with like this old set of tarot cards I had. And at the time I didn't know much about tarot because I was just starting on this idea, so I hadn't done a ton of research into it yet. And it worked, and we like we had this cool campaign all planned, and everyone's like, oh, now we're not going to play this campaign, huh? I was like, no, we're just testing this game, and it's also like midnight, and I have to teach tomorrow, so I've got to go. But and then it just kind of grew from there. So basically what it is, Decuma is a tarot card based generic system that creates character connections between PCs, creates a location, including like a basic map with, so everyone has kind of reference points and knows where things are. Cultural aspects like slang terms and superstitions, and also NPCs. And then the last thing it creates is also like world dynamics. So not just what are the connections the characters have to each other, but what is the group's reputation in the world? Does anybody owe us money? Do we owe somebody else a favor? Like all these things that really give the GM a ton of stuff to work with when they're starting the campaign, when they're planning the campaign. So it does that. If you played like For the Queen, it's very similar to that, or like the Quiet Year, where you get a hand of cards and you flip them over, and then there's like questions there that are prompts. Like I said, I'm a fourth grade teacher. questions are a thing I'm good at. So you play for, it usually takes like 40 to 90 minutes, depending on how verbose your group is. And you end up with all these things to kind of like launch a campaign, and it works with any system or setting. And yeah, people are really liking it. I'm really excited about it.
It seems, I mean, so I listened to you on SassGeek, and I really enjoyed how many times both of them kept saying, I really want to play in this game. Like,
Yeah.
you know, as you're building this. And I think I love the fact, I recommend anybody listen to that if they're interested in Decuma. And if you're into RPGs, you should definitely be interested in Decuma right now. But there's my touch for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
But
GoldLassoGames.com/Kickstarter. There. Okay, now the
yes, and also
shilling is done.
be in the show notes and everything.
Thanks. Yeah.
But I like it's really built to build something compelling right off the bat, which is awesome. And that's not a thing that Microscope does. And I've never played The Quiet Year, but I've listened to actual plays and stuff like that. And like same thing, like that tells a complete story, but it's not for your new story, and I enjoy how Decuma does that. And I did immediately get like, oh, this is like a For the Queen style thing. And I almost feel like For the Queen has almost created this new like subgenre of RPG.
Yeah, they dub it Descended from the Queen.
Descended from the Queen?
Ooh. Yeah, so if you make a hack, because there's a bunch of For the Queen hacks out there now, the term you're supposed to use when you're creating it is Descended from the Queen.
That's fantastic. I didn't know that. That's
amazing. It's very cool. I have a couple of my friends who are working on like horror versions and different things like that. It's pretty fun.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I definitely have an idea that I need to play around with that. But I've had Alex on my show twice.
Nice.
And she inspired me to want to interview people, and then she also inspired me to want to start creating games. So it's cool that like I love that she's kind of created a subgenre. That's so awesome.
Yeah. But it really showed that like card-based mechanics can be something really viable and become really popular.
Yeah.
Because I love card-based mechanics, especially for things like I chose it specifically for Decuma because you're not, unlike like die roll tables, there's not going to be a repeat.
Yeah.
Like you ask a question on a card, you discard the card, you're not going to get that question again. Where, if you do Traveler, things like that, character creation, like there might be repeats sometimes. You might have the same thing. So that's the really cool thing about card mechanics.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a big fan of card. Not to talk about, not to be the Grongyard who was talking about old games again, but
okay.
My favorite version of Marvel games was the Marvel Superheroes Adventure game, which had a deck of specialized cards that you made your characters with.
Yeah.
And it was not balanced at all, which was one of my. I love games that are not balanced,
right?
Because the world isn't balanced, and and it's, I don't know, not to be like, oh, the world isn't fair, but no, that's not what I mean. It just, it's fun to play in those elements. So yeah, I love playing with cards. I love the idea that it's the game before the game that you can play. And that's a really cool thing. But while you were developing this, you came up with Virgins and Vixens.
Yes.
Also, which is available now on Golden Lasso Games.
Yes.
Yeah. So how did that come about?
So Decuma has been in the works for a while now. I did some rounds of it with some very, very prototype cards. They're basically like Miss Cleo cards I bought with like address labels on them with questions on them. So I did the rounds at a couple conventions. I got a lot of feedback there. Came back, made it a PDF, and released the beta into the world for feedback, because that was something that I thought was really, really important to do, just for sensitivity reasons, for making sure it was as system and setting agnostic as I thought it was. And it turned out I got some great feedback that made it even much better than it would have been if I just released it. But while that's happening, like, that takes months. And thank you to everyone who, like, the hundreds of people who were great enough to like try out my crazy game. But you're sitting on your hands, you're like, okay, and you're nervous about your thing, and every few days somebody like writes to you about what's wrong with it, nicely, but it's still like criticism.
Sure.
And in the meantime, I got involved with the Itch.io community, which is itch.io, and it's a website and platform for independent game creators. And it really was developed for video game creators, and that's what most of it is. But there's like this very niche community of tabletop gamers who are on there, who are releasing all types of role-playing, and some of them are tabletop, some of them are narrative, some of them like literally anything you could think of, it's being created on there, and usually sold for nothing to like $5 as PDFs. And so I had a bunch of friends who were releasing stuff on that while I was working on Decuma, so I got involved on that and just really loved it. And they have these things called jams, where not a contest, but it's like, okay, over the next 2 weeks, we're all going to make games with this theme. And then everyone just kind of like, pats each other on their back and get some eyes on your designing and get feedback on your designing. It's a really cool process. And one of the themes was folklore. And that's something I love. Like, I love mythology, I love folklore. I've been a history teacher, that in teaching 4th grade now, one of the things we talk about is folk tales a lot. So something I'm very educated in and versed in. So I was like, okay, so all these people are doing this thing. We had like 2 weeks to get it done. And I'm trying to think of what do I want to do? Like, a lot of people were doing games based on a specific tale they loved, or fairy tale or story. So I was looking at it, and there were so many I liked. And then I just started thinking about the idea of women in a lot of these story mediums, in mythology and folklore, in all these kind of oral traditions. No matter where you look in the world, there's these tropes that are pretty much universal. There's always like a few that break the rules, but those are, those tend to be the exceptions more than the rule. So, there's like the prize, who's, that's the princess in the tower who doesn't have any speaking lines for the whole thing, but she's in trouble, and then the knight or the prince or whoever saves her, and then they marry. She still doesn't get to speak after that. There's, the basic thing, the Sleeping Beauty type character. And then there's there's a bunch of tropes of that. Then there's, the wise old woman who, gets painted as a witch because she's knowledgeable and doesn't necessarily conform to society's norms. Usually she's not pretty. There's the smart, the smart woman who is beautiful and things like that, but is overlooked. So a lot of times she'll use her wisdom or her knowledge to save a male character, who then will show his, gratitude by marrying her, because that's all she needs in life. So there's all these tropes, and like it's universal through many cultures. So I decided to play on that idea. So basically the idea of virgins and vixens is you start off as a virgin or a vixen, one of these tropes of good or evil women on folk tales. The character sheets I'm super proud of, because you print them out. Yeah, you print them out, and then you fold it into a little storybook. There's like little hinges and all this thing. Yep. So, and then you pick 5 words off the list to describe your character. So if you're the prize, you might be beautiful and charming and helpless. There's some positive and some negative ones. There's no way to create a super effective character with any of the, any 5 of the words that are listed. You're not going to be able to like rock at anything. Depending on the playbook you pick, you might be smart, but desperate or something like that. So there's good and bad for both. As you play through, there's a dice mechanic. It's similar to PBTA, but I changed the ratios a little bit on it. So basically you roll 3 dice, if it's one of the words if you're using one of the words that's circled, like if you're charming someone to let you into the castle, then, and you have that circled, then you pick the 2 highest dice.
Mm-hmm.
If you're like trying to climb the wall and you've never been outside your palace before, then you pick your 2 lowest dice, because that's not, the athletic is not one of the words you picked, because it's not there. So then as you go through, if you succeed on things that are at disadvantage, then you get what are called empowerments. And slowly throughout the game, as you gain empowerment, you get to cross off some of the words you have circled. You don't have to cross them all off, but if you're like, oh, helpless, I'll cross that off, and I'm going to write in, I get to pick a new word. So I'll put in, capable or something like that. Or athletic, because I climbed a wall and I figured out I could climb a wall. So you get to kind of move away from that one-dimensional trope and become a more unique, fleshed out character who, has had life experience. Amazing. Sorry, that was a really long explanation.
No, it's great. What I wanted to say is, because I've recently gotten in the itch.io games and kind of been looking around there. It's one of the best ones I've seen on there.
Oh, thank you.
And I just happened to find it when we first started talking about having you on the lounge. So I run into, definitely, you've been talking tons about Decuma. I definitely wanted to be able to spotlight this other amazing thing that you've done.
I appreciate that.
That I think is very cool. And
I'm very proud of it. It's one of those things that, like, I think Decuma is a more useful thing for the gaming community at large.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Virgins and Vixens is a much closer representation of my personality and like what I would like to continue creating for tabletop role playing. Because I actually really have fallen in love with kind of the mechanic and the system that I created for it. I'm still trying to think of like a cute name for it, but I do want to do more games with that same mechanic with other things. I think it would be a really great system for kids, actually.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like a real. I really want to play it, and that's one of those things that, I mean, I say that with a lot of games, but when I was reading through it, I was like, I made sure that I had all the sheets, and I'm like, should I print these up right now? Like, I don't have anybody to play with right now, but I was ready to start now.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's funny because it's gotten a lot of people are like say that, but there haven't been a lot of people who've wanted to run it because I think they're a little bit nervous. Like all the playbooks are based on tropes of women. But you don't, it says in the rules you don't have to play them as women. Like you can play them as other, because a lot of the tropes also can apply to other genders or however people identify. Especially if you're, LGBTQIA, like there's lots of similar experiences where people are put into tropey categories or stereotypes that they can then break out of. So it can definitely be more universal than just the experiences of women. But there's like hesitation for people sometimes to be like, I don't know if I want to play that. So it's interesting. It's been a very educational thing to release.
I've kind of looked at it myself as, because I'll play or run anything is the thing I always say at least once. And I'm actually really interested in running it, believe it or not, because I'm a dude and I kind of want to. I don't know. I don't mind like pushing that on myself a little bit. Like, I don't mind poking at myself a little bit. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. And that's sort of the purpose of it. If the only people who play it are people who already know that experience, then that's fine. Like it's like, that's great, but it's also meant to be a bit of a tool where people can maybe build up some empathy for like, for so many of the stories that women are told their whole lives. Like lot of Disney movies. Like, and it's only been the last few years they've started breaking out of kind of that trope. Like, even when they had a little bit more powerful, quote, powerful, or like strong-minded, characters. Like, when I was, of the age to watch Disney movies as they were released, it was, Belle from Beauty and the Beast, and we had, Jasmine from Aladdin, and sure, they were like smart and outspoken, but at the end they still just got married, and was the end. So it's just now been the last few movies, even like Moana and things like that, where they have a little bit more of a destiny, or a little bit more of an ambition in their life. So even that as a kid, it pissed me off. Jasmine sings so many songs about show you the world, and then she ends up marrying and staying in that castle, and you're like, I guess they get to ride on the carpet and see the world. I don't know, like, but
well, you did great, Aladdin. I'm gonna leave.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go see that world, because I did the song about it. That's great.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I love that so much.
It's like, there's like, you had a giant thing, if no follow through on that plot point of that song. Okay, got it. So it's very strange, but and it's one of these things that is pervasive, and still, as a woman growing up in wherever you are in the world. And that's one of the things on all of the playbooks. Like, I list a bunch of the myths and folklore and things from different places in the world. It was really important to me that it wasn't just like European fairy tales.
Yeah.
So like in the book, there's artwork, there's traditional artwork from multiple countries and things like that, representing stories from all over, because these things are absolutely part of that.
They're very pervasive themes. And I actually really enjoy. In fact, that was the other thing I was looking at. It was like, ooh, there's a bunch of like folklore that I don't know that she's referencing here. I need to read that. So always a good thing. Kimi, this has been a great conversation. The last thing I want to bring up is the Mary Sues.
Oh yeah.
Because you're in a band too.
Yeah, another hobby I collected.
Things we talked about with you. You're also in a band.
Yeah.
So tell me about the Mary Sues.
The Mary Sues is still a pretty new venture. We're rehearsing and we're building up our catalog right now. It's me and two of my best friends, Claire and Carol. We were in a band called the Merry Wives of Windsor at the Renaissance Fair for like 10, 12 years, a really long time, together. I've stopped doing the Renaissance Fair just because it's like one of those things that just takes too much time. And after singing your heart out, in the hot sun of Southern California for a weekend in the summer, showing up and teaching all day on Monday, just like, I aged out a little bit. I just like, I'm sorry, I have to have a voice on Monday. So I stopped doing that. I still go. I still love all the people there. It's amazing. But for a while, like, I haven't been doing anything musical, which has kind of been like a little bit of a drag on my soul because I really enjoy it. I especially enjoy writing songs, so like lyrics and things like that. And it's always fun to go to the fair and like hear people say. I write a lot of, if you listen to the Merry Wives of Windsor, I write a lot of like dirty songs.
Oh, nice.
We sing, the Merry Wives of Windsor sing dirty songs on the NC-17 stage. So that's, most of my repertoire is not something that's child friendly. So I was looking forward to like writing songs again and playing music again and singing with my friends. So I've been trying to put together a nerd band for like 6 years, and things just keep not like, it just keeps like, oh, I can't, or somebody moves away, so all these things. So I finally was like, okay, no, I'm doing this year. This is my goal. I put it on my resolutions for 2019. And then Carol and Claire, the thing that really locked it in, Carol's been on the roster for a while, but my friend Claire moved back to California from Texas. So that just like locked it in. So we have a soprano, a mezzo, and a bass, and an alto now, an alto who plays bass. So then I play an instrument called the bouzouki, which is similar to a guitar. And Claire plays the keyboard. And so we have music that we make. We released one song so far.
Yes.
If you go to youtube.com/Mary Sue's Band, then you can see our the child is this Baby Yoda themed Christmas music video.
It's amazing. Everybody,
it's very fun.
It's great.
It's very fun, and we are having too much fun. It was amazing, and yeah, it was great, and just we made that we learned that song and recorded it and did that music video all in like 48 hours. So we were very sleep deprived, and we just, you can kind of see as we're doing like the singing and stuff on the video, like we are just at some point just messing around with lightsabers, like just having a crazy time. So much fun. And it was really fun to do all that. And now we're rehearsing. We're hoping to have some more songs out. Some of them we'll do videos for, some of them we won't. We're doing covers of a bunch of songs. We're doing like the Firefly theme. We're doing some original songs. We have a bunch of gaming and D&D type songs that are coming up too. So yeah, that's sort of what the next few months have there. If you go to marysuesband.com, you can kind of follow us there. We also have a Facebook that has not a lot of stuff on it because we've only been a band for about 4 months. Mm-hmm. So we're still very new, but yeah, we're just kind of building up. We really need like at least 8 solid songs to start doing gigs.
Okay.
We've all been in different bands, so we're all pretty good at that part of it. So we've got 5 right now. We've got 2 that were just introduced this last week at rehearsal. So we're getting there. We're hoping by like summer and fall to have like enough to like start doing little gigs and to have an album's worth of music. We probably won't release an album because that's sort of gone the way of the dodo.
SoundCloud or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So all that stuff will be available. You can find us. The Child Is This you can find on iTunes and Spotify and all those things. But we're probably just going to release things as like individual singles because nobody buys albums anymore. So you might as well just release all the songs individually and let people pick what they like.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's amazing. I mean, this has been this has been such a great ride for me. Interviewing you, because you do.
I mean, how can you go wrong if you start with Big Barda? Like that's like anything that starts with Beta Ray Bill and Big Barda is just going to be amazing.
Oh my God, I want to see them. Do I want to see them fight or team up?
It needs to be one of those fights where they start fighting each other and then like the bad guy shows up, so then they team up against the bad guy like partway through.
Yes. That's a great. Can we write that story? No, we can't. We don't know.
I don't need another hobby. Neither do you.
That's true. But this has been a really fantastic time. I used to have an aunt that would say idle hands are the devil's work. The devil is not coming anywhere near you because you are very busy.
Super busy.
But I do end every show with my guest telling the lounge lizards out there, my fans, or my listeners. I don't know, but I imagine most of them are listening in anger. But I to stay classy. And I was wondering if you would be willing to do that.
Absolutely.
And I was going to make a big ask of you and ask if you would like to sing that.
Oh.
If you don't want to, that's perfectly fine.
I have to think of like the tune to like sing it to.
Yeah, I don't know either.
So just like stay classy?
Yeah, just stay classy, lounge lizards.
All right. Stay classy, lounge lizards. Stay classy like Beta Ray Bill.
I love it so much. Thanks again to the fantastic, amazing Kimi Hughes for coming on the lounge, chatting with me. It was a huge honor to have her on. I'm I hope you enjoyed it as well. Go check out Decuma. It is currently kickstarting. It is a thing you need in your toolbox if you play role-playing games. Check out Happy Jacks. Check out the Mary Sues. Support Kimi in everything she does, of course, because you're awesome and she's awesome. Awesome works together. And that especially goes for when we're talking about this show, which is...
The Lounge is a Misdirected Mark production, the media arm of Encoded Designs, with lots of great shows like this one. Misdirected Mark. Chris, Phil, Bob, and Camden go live every Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern to break down and get inside games, game mastering, playing games, and game design in an effort to entertain and inform you. The Lounge theme, And So It Begins by Artificial Music, is used under Creative Commons 3.0. Support Contessa at contessa.rocks. Find your host, Jesse Doc Edmond, at Doc Palindrome on Twitter. All the links from this episode can be found in the episode